And there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another fantastic installment from very high above all the perfidious and mendacious forms of Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Thursday. We begin this morning with a tradition of Cowboy State Politics, one that we don't do nearly as often as we should, and perhaps we should be able to do this more often. But anyway, this started way back in the beginnings of Cowboy State Politics, and it's a fond farewell to one of, I don't want to say my most beloved characters, because on this show, I do have a cast of characters, and I don't know that any of them are really beloved. But this guy has been a source of material for a very long time on the program. Play cut number one. We begin this morning with a fond farewell. A tradition that was started right here at Cowboy State Politics in the very first and second year of the program. At that time, veteran Pravda on the Platte. Reporter Nick Reynolds was at the helm of the Casper Star Tribune's Politics 307, or 307 Politics. I never could get those straight, which is kind of apropos when you think about the Red Star. They couldn't get anything straight either. It wasn't too long, and then Nick Reynolds, almost out of the blue, went on to pursue his journalistic villainy at Newsweek. Quite a fitting place for him, I might add. I shouldn't be too hard on old Nick, though. He did give Cowboy State Politics and your illustrious host a front-page story on the Pravda on the Platte. Not exactly something that I'm super, super proud of, although I do have it framed. I seem to be getting off topic. Anyway, Nick Reynolds left, and he was replaced by the soon and quickly forgotten Victoria Evis. She continued the completely dishonest tradition started by Nick Reynolds of referring to any conservative as a member of the radical right wing. Something that, unfortunately, so-called journalists in the Cowboy State have not forgotten about. Evis was not around very long, and then she unceremoniously and quietly moved on to the Montana Free Press. While conservatives didn't exactly hold a parade when we heard about her exit, we were nonetheless overjoyed about her departure. It was about this time that the cow pie started gaining ground in Wyoming media. In the beginning, the cow pie was kind of a breath of fresh air. At the very least, they were kind of middle of the road, and nowhere near the Soviet-style propagandist journalism that was being perpetrated on all of us by Nick Reynolds and Victoria Evis at the Red Star. That was until they hired former Cody Enterprise reporter Trotsky Wolfson. Not to give him too much credit, but he kind of picked up where Nick Reynolds left off. But unfortunately, that era has come to an end, my friends. No longer will Trotsky Wolfson's name be synonymous with the cow pie. And so, Trotsky, we bid you a fond farewell. Your efforts Though gallant to paint every conservative in the state of Wyoming as a member of the Freedom Caucus will no doubt go down in infamy, they will be forever resigned to the dustbin of Wyoming political history. And while some will grieve at your exit and give you the customary tip of their propeller hat as you move towards the exit sign, there are others, like myself, that will just bid you a fond adieu and sing,
It's a baby. Propeller baby.
Happy days are here again. The skies above are clear again. Let us sing a song of cheer again. Happy days are here again.
Of course, we shouldn't celebrate too much because no doubt B. Wayne Hughes and his minions at the Cow Pie will find yet another hack liberal reporter to replace old Trotsky. And let's all just be perfectly honest. Whomever they find, it'll take them a while for them to get their leftist liberal sea legs underneath them. Until then, my friends, we should celebrate, if only a little bit.
Yes.
So, Trotsky, it's been real, it's been fun, but I really don't think it's been real fun.
Yes, my
I think
friends.
we need the little party favors.
We do. We need party hats. And,
Yeah, well, we don't need that.
Well, it's true, my friends, that Trotsky has moved on from the Cow Pie, and I can't say that I'm terribly disappointed, though. And I am looking forward to figuring out exactly who it is that's going to replace Trotsky, because this is kind of the way it works in Wyoming political media is that you have like basically one big reporter that all the attention's focused on, and then they move on, and then it's the next one and the next one and the next one. So I'm kind of looking forward to see who it is that B. Wayne Hughes picks this time. Now, if he had any brains about him at all, which I do question that, whether or not he does, he'd pick somebody that was kind of middle of the road, not a crossover voting Democrat that Trotsky Wolfson is. And by the way, did you know that that's absolutely true, Agent 29, that Trotsky is one of the big crossover voters? When he moved here in 2018, he was a registered Democrat. And then the very next election, on election day, he registered as a Republican. And, I sat next to him at the Charlie Kirk event. And after it was all done, I said, well, Leo, what did you think? And he says, well, I agreed with half of it. I'm like, half of it? How could you possibly only agree with half of it? And he goes, well, I am what I am. Yes, indeed, Trotsky, you are. And that's why you have the name Trotsky, is I'm pretty much convinced that you're a communist. Anyway, so see you later, Trotsky. Adieu. Don't let the door hit you on your way out. All right. We begin with, and here's another ridiculous thing that pops up. And today's show is really about the media. Most of it is. I've got a number of different things that, it just confirms everything we know about like big media. And by the way, if you want to be part of the show, the phone number in the studio is 307-374-8989. 307-374-8989. If there is something on your mind that you want to opine about, go ahead and give me a call. One more time, that number is 307-374-8989. Well, in Times Square, the big place in New York that, they hold the New Year's Eve ball dropping and all of that. Well, in Times Square, they have erected a 12-foot statue of an overweight black woman. I'm not even kidding. And, I pulled this up on the screen, and hold on just a minute there, Agent 29, and we'll, let's see here. Slideshow front. There we go. Check this out. That is the 12-foot statue that is in the middle of Times Square right now. Now, the question is, why would we erect such a statue? Well, the Fox News, Jesse Waters last night, said and discussed the statue of the fictional black woman that was recently erected in New York City's Times Square. New York City's 12-foot tall black woman in casual clothing that its creator hopes will encourage people to reflect on, quote, greater cultural diversity. New York-based Times Square Arts recently put up the statue titled Grounded in the Stars by artist Tom Price, along with his Man series animated billboards, both of which are temporary, but they're causing quite a stir. The Times Square website says, quote, Price's multi-channel presentation on the screens and sculptural installation on the plaza Below forms of a two-part takeover in Times Square that foregrounds the intrinsic value of the individual and amplifies traditionally marginalized bodies on a monumental scale. The Grounded in the Stars display will be featured in Times Square until June 17th. Let's see here. Yeah, enough of this garbage. So the question is, why? Well, of course, because New York is synonymous with the terms diversity, equity, and inclusion. And, we have to include everybody, no matter who they are, what they look like, or, or if they have any relevance whatsoever. But the question I have is, why are all of the famous statues idolized versions of what men and women look like? You ever notice that in Greek art? Do you see any statues of people who are not exactly idolized?
I see some that aren't dressed.
Well, there's a lot of that.
But no, they were supposed to be bigger than life.
Yes.
They were supposed to be something to aspire to.
Yep.
Something to look up to. Every classroom in the United States for years had that picture of George Washington. You'd see a picture of Lincoln or wherever. You go to the most awe-inspiring thing, I think, in Washington, D.C. is the Lincoln Memorial.
Lincoln Memorial.
Yeah, you
without
walk
a
up
doubt.
there, it's just, wow.
It is amazing. And it's, like you said, they're bigger than life, they're awe-inspiring, and they're something to aspire to. So the question is, what are we trying to inspire in downtown New York now? I mean, it is a fact that I shouldn't say the vast majority, but a large percentage of Americans are overweight. They're not fit. They've got a number of health problems going on, diabetes being the biggest one of them. So what exactly are we asking Americans to aspire to? I think that perhaps we should take a second look at that and maybe not put that statue up in Times Square.
They're saying they want to aspire to diversity.
Yes, diversity above all else.
Whatever happened to e pluribus unum?
Yes.
Unity, we don't use that
we
word.
don't use that word on this program. Oh, and why did you have to do that to me? You knew what that was going to do. Over the past week, I think I've heard that term unity at least 1,000 times. And, let me just explain why I disagree with it. I don't need to unify with people just for the sake of unity. If you're wrong, I'm not going to unify with you. If your ideas are fundamentally in contrast to the ideas of the founding fathers or to Republican and conservative values, I'm not going to unify with you. I have no reason whatsoever to unify with redcoats.
That's exactly the reason that I would not go to the Republican caucuses in Cheyenne. I'm sorry. What are we going to do? Talk strategy?
Not with him.
Yeah, wasn't going to work for me. A lot of people felt otherwise. They have every right to be wrong. That's fine.
You have your right to your opinion, even if it is wrong.
Yeah, just to note to the viewers and the listeners, my job is pushing buttons, and not all those buttons are mechanical.
Oh, you definitely pushed one. But see, this is the mantra that we've heard from. Well, I heard it over and over and over at the GOP meeting. We have to have unity. All right, what are we unifying on? Are we unifying on conservative principles of good governance, or are we just unifying for the sake of unifying? Are we back to the whole, we just have to have a big tent and it doesn't really matter what your beliefs are? That we're all Republicans and we should all just get along? I disagree. I don't believe in Rodney King. Yeah, he's there, but I don't believe in what he said. Can't we all just get along? No, we can't. If you're the group of people that think it's okay to kill a baby, yeah, I'm not unifying with you. If you think it's higher taxes or more government spending or bigger government or less freedom, yeah, count me out. I don't need your dumb unity. Back in a minute. It's spring-ish in Wyoming. Well, what that means for the uninitiated is that it's going to be 70 degrees one day and then snow 1.5 feet the next. And really, if you don't like those two options, just wait a little bit. The weather will change. I know, it sounds a little stressful, but really you should put your mind at ease and buy a pair of socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. They'll keep you warm and dry even on the nastiest, coldest spring-ish day, and they'll keep you cool and dry even when it's 75 and sunny. To get you a pair, go to their website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you're not going to be disappointed. Are you one of those people that said something like this before Trump became president?
I have a house in Spain that is going to be ready right after the election.
Siberia,
Nova Scotia.
I'm definitely moving to Canada.
Straight to hell.
Iceland, France.
Asia's pretty cool.
And has the past 5 weeks just been more than you could bear? If that's the case, you have come to the right place. All you need to do is call my friend Rebecca Bextel at Compass Real Estate. She has her fingers on the pulse of the real estate market all across the state of Wyoming. Last year, she sold around $30 million worth of property, everything from small residential properties all the way up to big giant ranches. So if you've got to get the heck out of Dodge, if you've got to be gone Johnson because you can't stand that Trump is the president, call Rebecca Bextel. Her phone number is 307-699-3519. Let me say that one more time for you in case you missed it. 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day. I'm only gonna get stronger.
Welcome back to the program, my friends. David Iverson, Cowboy State Politics. I am documented to be almost always right 99% of the time. And I mean, it's a gigantic formula. And, the mainstream media, they don't even try to do that. And I'm going to give you some examples of that here in just a second. Journalism, big journalism, needs to die a painful death, my friends, which is why we have the resurgence isn't the right word. Anyway, why we have a whole bunch of new media programs. The usurpation of big media by independent folks like me. Now, during the break, I'm sure you noticed or have noticed that the volume on the broadcast gets throttled. And the reason for that is there's a whole bunch of different pieces of software that the broadcast has to go through. And we're aware that we're trying to figure it out exactly how to counteract that. But as of yet, we're still working on it. So, yeah, we know. I know it's annoying. Thank you for putting up with it. Oh, and thank you for listening. If it weren't for you, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing and certainly wouldn't be able to make any money at it. Since, of course, the main point of this is confiscatory advertising rates. So welcome back to the program. If you want to be part of the show, the phone number in the studio is 307-374-8989. If there's something that you want to opine on, well, then just give me a call. 307-374-8989. Well, in Wyoming, it is time for the it's not time. It's kind of a progression that happens, but it's a slow burn of legislative ratings. The Redcoat Awards, as they were, well, the media has their own type of awards, and it's the Pulitzer Prize and all sorts of different things that so-called journalists are given. From the Washington Post fact checker who attacked Tim Scott's Black heritage and accused the GOP of lying about Biden's senility, well, he won a journalism award. Glenn Kessler, the Washington Post's preeminent fact checker, best known for attacking Tim Scott's Black heritage and dismissing evidence of Joe Biden's decline as a right-wing conspiracy, is finally being honored for his commitment to, listen to this, truth and accountability and transparency. The Museum of Political Corruption announced Kessler as this year's winner of the Nellie Bly Award for Investigative Journalism, praising his work as a testament to the power of fact-based reporting. There's nothing fact or based about Kessler's reporting. In fact, he was honored to be recognized for unraveling falsehoods using intensive investigation and deep research. Indeed, one of his most memorable fact checks features some exhaustive research into the family history of Tim Scott, the first Black senator to represent the southern state since Reconstruction. Days before Scott was scheduled to give the Republican response to then-President Joe Biden's congressional address in 2021, Kessler conducted a fanatically extensive investigation into Scott's claim that his grandfather, Artis Ware, was illiterate and dropped out of school to pick cotton during the Great Depression. The Post journalist dove deep into Scott's lineage and uncovered some allegedly damning evidence. He found documents suggesting that Artis Ware's father was not illiterate, worked on a farm owned by a privileged black father, and lived in a house worth $10,000 in today's dollars. A $10,000 house in today's money. Anyway, Kessler dug up census records indicating that Artis Ware may have attended school through the 4th grade, not the 3rd grade, as Tim Scott had said. His investigation was aided by, quote, several experts, including 2 university professors who happened to be Democratic donors. Kessler concluded that Scott's version of his family history was a tidy story package for political consumption. That was missing some nuance because it downplayed the success of his ancestors who were living the high life in South Carolina in the early 1900s on a plantation. How dare Tim Scott forget that his grandfather actually went to 4th grade instead of 3rd grade? So this guy receives a report for investigative journalism. Now, he went on to talk about every conservative who even thought to suggest that perhaps Biden was a little bit off his rocker. I mean, I don't know how any journalist would ever think that Biden's mental decline was anything but fabricated.
We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women created by you know the thing.
Elect me. I'm in the 20th century, 21st century.
True international average of pressure. I got hairy
Oh, you gotta let that continue.
legs that turn that.
I'm not going to be a mule. I got something to do. I got to go do boom, boom, boom. I just spoke at Dartmouth on healthcare at the medical school, or not. I guess I wasn't actually on the campus, but people from the medical school were at the. I want to be clear. I'm not going nuts. I'm not sure whether it's a medical school or where the hell I spoke, but it was on the campus. Beer brewed here, it is used to make the brew beer in this refiner. Oh, Earth Rider, thanks for the great lakes.
All right. I think we get the point there. So who would have ever suggested that Joe Biden wasn't in possession of all of his mental faculties? And it was Glenn Kessler who exposed all of that. Exposed himself, perhaps. But that's not the end of all of the so-called journalistic awards. From the Washington Free Beacon, what vibe shift? The Pulitzer Prize Board affirms the media's obsession with woke politics. Let me just give you a couple of examples here. Public Service, their award for public service, ProPublica, the nonprofit news outlet funded by Apple widow Lauren Powell Jobs and other rich liberals, won for its reporting on a series of deaths allegedly attributable to state abortion laws. The reporting was credibly denounced as misleading, if not deliberately deceptive, especially with respect to the 2022 death of Amber Thurman, a Georgia woman who died after experiencing a rare complication from abortion pills. Ben Crump, the high-profile civil rights attorney, filed a lawsuit on her behalf, arguing that the doctors, not state law, were to blame. How about national reporting? The Wall Street Journal took home the prize for its widely denounced but accurate reporting of Joe Biden's cognitive decline. Just kidding. The Journal has been frequently snubbed by the Pulitzer Board due to its affiliation with conservative billionaire Rupert Murdoch. For example, the paper did not win the Pulitzer Prize for exposing Theranos founder Elizabeth Holmes as a complete fraud. The Journal won last year, however, for a series of articles chronicling the political and personal shifts of Elon Musk. In the breaking news category, this year's award went to local reporters in North Carolina for their coverage of Hurricane Helene and its aftermath. Nope, wrong again. Journalists didn't care about the hurricane and its rural white victims at the same time. And they still don't. Instead, the Washington Post was recognized for its coverage of the attempted assassination of Donald Trump in 2024. The paper's initial report on the obvious shooting read as follows. Quote, Trump taken away after loud noises at rally. The reporter who led the coverage, Isaac Arnsdorf, is one of a few journalists who hasn't quit the Post in protest. He probably won't be there much longer now that he has a Pulitzer Prize. How about in commentary? Musab Abu Taha, the Palestinian poet and visiting scholar at Syracuse who taught English for the controversial United Nations Relief and Works Agency, or UNRWA, won for his New Yorker essay on the physical and emotional carnage in Gaza. In an interview with NPR last year, Abu Taha said media outlets should, quote, stop talking about Hamas because Israel was to blame for October 7th. He definitely needs a prize. Let's see here. What else we got here? History. Here's a good one. The Pulitzer Prize Board chose 2 winners in this category, presumably because they didn't want to decide whether Native Americans were more oppressed than Black people. Ida L. Fields, Black, won for her, quote, richly textured and revelatory account of the slave rebellion. And so did Kathleen Duvall for what the New York Times called a magisterial overview of 1,000 years of Native American history, inspired and informed by Native scholars, artists, and activists. The sole runner-up in the category was Seth Rockman, was a material history of American slavery. And the list goes on and on and on. But there's no recognition of any journalist who dared to write a piece that was in opposition to anything that was the Biden agenda. Seems to me that if you really wanted a Pulitzer Prize, maybe you should investigate who exactly was pulling the strings in the Biden administration, because we know it wasn't Joe Biden. In fact, we know that most of the proclamations and papers and all that sort of thing that came out of the Oval Office were signed with an auto pen. Now, I'm not saying that Joe Biden was incapable of signing. Well, maybe I am. But in any case, whomever was operating the auto pen was definitely in control of the Oval Office. Now, if you were an investigative reporter, perhaps you would dig into that. But we didn't see any reporters from the Wall Street Journal or the Washington Post or any of the big media names look into any of that, because all of them were focused on politics and Democratic politics. And so, the reason why I say that big journalism should die and perhaps is dead and needs to die a painful death is it's not journalism anymore. Now, in this program, it's very, very clear when I'm doing journalism and when I'm giving you opinion. Most of the time, it's opinion. But the reason why I tell you where the information is coming from is so that you can go look it up for yourself. So you don't have to rely on me. In fact, don't believe a word that I say. Go look it up for yourself. Find out what is true so that you can make the argument yourself. Don't rely on me, because even though I'm right 99% of the time, I do make mistakes every once in a while.
Yeah, every once in a while. I should repeat that the views of the host are not necessarily those of the producer,
but they should
be. They should be. There's the old expression, curiosity killed the cat.
Yeah.
And the antithesis is true where news is concerned. I've said many times, I don't understand mainstream media in Wyoming because Wyoming is so conservative. That's if you're after it for money, a hint for you, go conservative. And I've been in office for 3 years. I've been
contacted. 3 painful years.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're all witnessing it.
Yeah.
Experiencing it.
Inflicting as much pain as I've been inflicted.
You're good at
it. But you know how many times Sheridan Media has contacted me for a comment? Or absolutely zero. No curiosity whatsoever. I'll be on the floor in the middle of a discussion about some particular issue and maybe make a couple of amendments according to that. They write an article, nowhere to be seen.
Exactly right. And that, I think, goes to the heart of what, I think that there's 2 big problems. The first one is that all media sources, I shouldn't say all, the vast majority of media sources are focused on only one thing, and that's politics. That getting their liberal agenda passed. And it's no more complicated than Democratic politicians pay for a lot of media outlets in the state. And if it's a newspaper, it's paid through legal notices. We have in law that your local paper has to be paid by government to publish all the government stuff. And at a time, that was absolutely necessary. If you wanted transparency in government, well, you had to publish it in the paper. Well, the truth is now most people don't read a newspaper. Now, I still enjoy it. If I could find a newspaper that was published every day that was worth paying for, then sure, I'd subscribe to it. But the truth is that most of what you get in your local paper is nothing more than political left-wing dribble. And the other part of this, so it's self-perpetuating. And the other part of this is that it is entirely about money. Now, online media sources, at least in Wyoming, don't get paid through legal notices. However, if you look at the sponsorship page of pick any online media source in Wyoming, and what you'll find is a whole bunch of government associated endeavors. It's either the Wyoming Business Council. When you see those ads that say that's why, WY, that's the Wyoming Business Council. The license plates. Yeah. I mean, it's all about money, and those folks in the media, yeah, they don't want to focus on conservatives that might want to do away with all that wasteful spending. We'll come back in just a second, and we'll talk about the Biden memo.
Here at U.S. Coin Capital, we hear from Americans across the United States who have a growing concern about the future purchasing power of U.S. paper money. Many Americans are looking for an alternative for long-term capital. For more than 35 years, the people at U.S. Coin Capital have educated American investors on how to properly accumulate United States gold and silver coins. Call us at 1-800-878-2646 or visit us on the web, uscoincapital.com.
Make sure that you subscribe and follow the Cowboy State Politics podcast. You can do that from the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. That way, you'll make sure that you won't miss a single episode of Cowboy State Politics.
Some say standing up for what you believe in is being extreme. Ask any woman in Wyoming. They'll tell you this is called courage. The mainstream media claims that holding the line on important issues is being unreasonable. My mom taught me this is called staying true to our principles. In other places, people argue you always have to compromise to get something done. Here in Wyoming, we know that some things are worth protecting at all costs. Some say it's time we give up on the values that made our state great to accommodate toxic culture. I say it's time to stand tall and protect the values that have served Wyoming well for over 134 years. Join Honor Wyoming as we defend and preserve the Wyoming way of life. Find out how you can make a difference today.
Visit honorwyoming.org. Welcome back to the program, my friends. David Iverson, Cowboy State Politics Live. Now, Mr. Producer, why is it that that you think the Biden administration issued a memo that would go after ordinary, everyday American citizens? Now, why would they even concern themselves with people like you and I that show up at school board meetings?
The only thing that I can think of would be to try to intimidate and discourage participation.
Yep.
That'd be my guess.
That would be my guess, too. And part of the reason for that is liberals cannot abide any opposition. And if you've ever attended a city council meeting or a county commissioners meeting, not in every county, but in some counties, there's at least one or two conservatives on that board. Now, the truth is that they can be outvoted on anything. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if you're one conservative on the city council says no every single time. They're still going to be outvoted, and the liberals are going to get their way. But that's not enough for them. And recently, at a number, and I've got audio of this. I just don't have it ready for today's program. That they get really mad when somebody doesn't agree with them. And it's almost like, how dare you even think that, they're in any way that you could disagree with us? And it really makes them angry because you can't have any opposition. And this goes all the way back to their founding political ideology. Go all the way back to 1917 during the Russian Revolution. The Bolsheviks, we call it the Bolshevik Revolution, because it was the Bolsheviks that really did most of the groundwork in that revolution. They were the working class people that got everybody fired up, and it was the Soviets that were directing the whole thing. Well, when the Soviets were able to take power, what did they do to the Bolsheviks? Yeah, they put a bullet in the back of their head, and they were done with them. And the reason I bring that up is you can't have any opposition, because if there's one lone guy out there saying, hey, maybe you're wrong, he may convince others, and you may end up having a revolt on the hands. Now, I'm not saying that city councilmen and county commissioners in the state of Wyoming think about things that deeply, but what I'm saying is their underlying political ideology. They already know they're in the wrong. They already know that they're wasting taxpayer money, but they want to do what they can. So, case in point, the $3 million flower pot. Nobody in their right mind would say that was a good use of taxpayer dollars, and yet they did it anyway. Yet, we have a county commissioner. His name is Lonnie Wright. By the way, we're going to have an episode on Lonnie Wright before too long. But from what I've been told, he is getting really angry with people questioning his support of the very ugly flower garden that kind of resembles a cemetery.
I'm going to grab a decent photo of that so that people on the other parts of the state can see what we're talking about exactly.
Yeah, during the break, I'll look it up and I'll show you what this ugly thing looks like. But my point is that Democrats and liberals, they cannot abide any opposition. And let me just give you a great example. During the Biden administration, there was a memo that was sent out to target Americans for quote unquote non-criminal behavior. And it was sent to the FBI. Now think about this. The FBI is supposedly the premier law enforcement agency in the country. And their job is to investigate and deal with criminal behavior, not non-criminal behavior, as the memo says. And I quote, the now declassified strategic plan provided the foundation for Biden-era agencies to target conservatives and anyone who appeared to resist or dissent from the Biden-Harris agenda. The Biden administration authorized federal law enforcement 4 years ago to target Americans engaged in, quote, concerning non-criminal behavior in the name of fighting domestic terrorism, with a specific eye on those serving in the military, owning firearms, or spreading what officials considered to be, quote, xenophobic disinformation, according to newly declassified documents. The stunning breadth of the mandate was disclosed when the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, recently released a fully unredacted version of the prior administration's, quote, strategic implementation plan for countering domestic terrorism. The June 2021 memo, so right after Biden took office, exposed for the first time the law enforcement and intelligence framework that led the FBI to monitor and probe conservative Catholics and parents who protested against some school board policies and justified Homeland Security to engage in censorship or debanking of Americans the administration considered to be potential enemies of the state. The directives provided to the Justice Department and the FBI by the NSC, the National Security Council, which developed the memo, said the agencies would, quote, drive, execute, and legislative action to ban assault weapons and high-capacity magazines, rein in ghost guns, monitor active duty service members for possible terrorism recruitment, and mitigate xenophobia and bias. Now, why that last part has anything to do with the FBI, I don't really have any answer for that, because it doesn't. The rest of it, the banning firearms and high capacity magazines and all that, that's not under the FBI's purview either. But at the very least, there's at least a tenuous connection with what the FBI should be doing. I mean, the FBI and the ATF do investigate firearms violations. I'm not saying that those violations are right or wrong. I'm just saying that that's kind of in their wheelhouse. But when you're talking about school boards and the angry parents that showed up at them, there's no connection to criminal behavior whatsoever. Not in the slightest. Yet, over and over during the Biden administration, we saw videos of parents being tackled by law enforcement at school board meetings. I personally have been escorted out of a school board meeting for doing nothing other than recording the meeting here at school district number 2. Now, this is a couple of years ago, probably I would say 2021, 2022, somewhere around there. I was at a school board meeting, and the only thing I was doing was sitting there recording, and I was escorted out by the police department. So the reason being is there really was an effort afoot to stamp out any sort of opposition to any of their plans. If you even suggested that maybe this whole mask thing is really ridiculous, well, you were denounced as a terrorist. How dare you want to endanger everybody else? If you suggested that maybe this vaccine wasn't really a vaccine, well, you were denounced as a conspiracy theorist. And if you dared to go to any sort of government meeting, well, then you were probably escorted out by the police department. Across the country, city council meetings, county commissioners meetings, school board meetings, parents were harassed, escorted out, and arrested simply for voicing opposition. For decades, FBI agents have been required to meet stringent requirements for opening criminal and national security investigations, known as predicates. The predicate for a full investigation required, quote, an articulable factual basis that reasonably indicates a crime or national security threat has or is about to occur, according to the Attorney General's guidelines for domestic FBI operations. And if you go pull up this article, and again, it's entitled "Biden Memo: Let Feds Target Americans for Non-Criminal Behavior Before Catholics and Parents Were Probed." I mean, it's a really long article, and I believe it's on justthenews.com. Which, by the way, is a great source of information if you want it. But go look up this article. It's a really deep dive into what exactly the Biden administration was doing. So Ken, I know that you're a big fan of the Obama administration, and I put together this story just for you.
Now you're pushing buttons.
Well, yeah. I mean, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So when we come back, we're going to talk about how Michelle Obama really was oppressed during her time in the White House, that it was really a struggle for her and her family. Just think about this. Sometimes they had to pay for their own food. We'll talk about that in just a second. You are listening to Cowboy State Politics Live. You can listen to the program on YouTube, on Facebook, on X, on Rumble, pretty much everywhere. It's almost like I'm omnipresent. If you miss an episode of Cowboy State Politics Live, you can always go to the live replay, which is located at the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, under the live replay button. You can listen to Cowboy State Politics Live every Tuesday through Friday at 8 a.m. You can listen to the Cowboy State Politics podcast anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest place is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles that I might bring up during the course of a program. That way, if your name is Joe Biden and you can't remember if you had your pudding today, well, I probably can't help you with that, but I can definitely tell you why you should have never ran for president. And now, back to our program. Welcome back to the program, my friends. David Iverson, Cowboy State Politics Live, doing what I was born to do, with talent given to me by God Almighty himself. Welcome back to the program, my friends. If you want to be part of the show, the phone number is 307-374-8989. Now, before the break, I was telling you about the $3 million flower pot that the Sheridan County Commissioners bought, and the one that they're really irritated that people are objecting to. So throw this up there. Aha! There it is. That is the $3 million flower pot. Notice how beautiful it is, how gorgeous the workmanship is, how the detail that was put into it. That is $3 million of your taxpayer money right there.
I see a lot of decorative iron.
There is a lot of decorative iron. You know who owns an iron?
I'm not going to go there.
I mean, it might be maybe perhaps one of the county commissioners had something to do with that. Who knows? Let's look at it one more time. Yeah, there we go. Yeah. Lots of $3 million worth of bull crap there. Anyway, so before the break, I was telling you that your favorite politician's wife was feeling very, very oppressed when she was in the White House. And, I understand what a challenge it is to live in the people's house, to have pretty much everything paid for. And, I mean, it's not like we're living in George Washington's time or John Adams' time. When those guys were president, you had to pay for everything. The government did not foot the bill for your entire existence. But now, yeah, that's pretty much the case.
I remember watching her one time. She was complaining about being repressed, she is married to the most powerful person on earth, catered to at every whim, living in the White House. And she's screaming about, we don't have any opportunity.
You don't understand, Ken. She has her own personal jet.
Well, does she?
Well, if you're the first lady, you have your own jet.
Well, is she the first lady?
Not anymore. By the way,
was she ever?
Oh, I don't know.
You know what I'm getting at.
Just to give you a hint of, just to remind you of who we're talking about. Get rid of it. Go. It's got to go. So anyway, from the Daily Wire, the former first lady of the United States, Michelle Obama, has an absurd complaint about her time living up in the White House. No, for Michelle to fully enjoy the luxuries of a first lady, not a single dime of her own money should be spent, ever. She expressed as much during a recent podcast appearance on May 1st, in which she made a ridiculous complaint about having to foot the bills for food and travel when she and her two daughters weren't with the president, Barack Obama. Quote, "How do you raise kids in the White House? It's dangerous," the former first lady said. Quote, as the first black potential president, we knew there would be death threats. How would we afford it? How could we possibly do that? Because it's expensive to live in the White House, as many people don't know. I mean, much is not covered. You're paying for every bit of food that you eat. You're not paying for housing and the staff in it, but everything, even travel. If you're not traveling with the president, if your kids are coming on the Bright Star, which the Bright Star is the first lady's jet, we had to pay for their travel to be even on the plane. Now, never mind that her husband was making $400,000 annually as president for 8 years. Never mind that pot of gold in the form of publishing advances, podcast deals, and speaking engagements awaiting them at the end of their 2 terms, while the rest of the country paid for everything themselves, from rent, mortgages, healthcare, insurance, to golf rounds and municipal links. Michelle couldn't get her meals and her jet-set life for free, and so life is just brutal. But perhaps one of the reasons that Michelle my belle, is feeling so oppressed is she actually believed that when they were elected, they were going to have to do something. Go ahead and play this, Kim.
And we owe them the best that we can provide them as a country.
Yeah.
And Barack knows that we are going to have to make sacrifices. We are going to have to change our conversation. We're going to have to change our traditions, our history. We're going to have to move into a different place as a nation to provide the kind of future that we all want desperately.
True international effort to pressure.
Yes, Barack knows that we're going to have to change our history. We're going to have to change our traditions. And that's what they attempted to do. essentially, it was a massive effort to try to rewrite history, historical revisionism, to completely transform America. Remember, we're 5 days away from fundamentally transforming the United States of America. That's what Barack Obama said in the days leading up to his first election. So perhaps Michelle Obama thinks that they weren't able to change enough, and she should have been able to have everything paid for in her ridiculous life as the First Lady of the United States. How oppressed she is.
Obviously, the most telling part of that was we're going to have to change history.
Yes.
We're going to have to lie.
Yep.
We're going to have to deny truth. And boy, you could just take off
what they
from
did,
there.
man. But now she said that at a campaign rally, and I think it may have been in Puerto Rico. It wasn't the mainland United States, but right after she said that, she was pulled from the campaign trail because that was too much truth for the American people. If everybody knew what Barack Obama and Michelle Obama had planned for the United States of America, he may never have gotten elected. But in any case, the poor, oppressed Michelle Obama, who is now worth somewhere around $70 million and owns several different houses, she wants you to feel bad for her. Oh, and we do. We do. We feel bad that she was ever allowed anywhere close to the people's house. We feel bad that we ever elected Barack Obama to the office of the presidency. And you know what? Maybe I should go back on that. Because for a long time, I think that people were asleep. Americans were asleep. Perhaps we still are. But Barack Obama was a giant wake-up call. Now, obviously, people were not awake after 4 years, and it took another 4. But I think that what Barack Obama's administration did is it woke a lot of Americans up. And, it started in 2015 with the Tea Party. And we saw the reaction of the mainstream media to the Tea Party. How dare anybody voice any dissent whatsoever? How dare you question their plans? Because they're too busy rewriting history and rewriting our traditions. And I mean, I don't know. I mean, the whole thing is just absolutely revolting if you ask me. Now, another thing that's absolutely revolting is Mark Zuckerberg. There's this online a website called Futurism. Now, you got to dig into exactly what this is, but there is a big movement, and I'm forgetting the term right now, but it is basically to include technology in the human existence. And one of the terms for it is futurism. Well, Mark Zuckerberg was having a conversation with these Futurism magazine folks. And he says that in response to the loneliness epidemic, there's a lot of loneliness going on. He is going to create most of your friends using artificial intelligence. Go ahead and play that.
I think as the personalization loop kicks in and the AI just starts to get to know you better and better, I think that will just be really compelling.
Really compelling.
One thing just from working on social media for a long time is there's the stat that I always think is crazy. The average American, I think it's fewer than 3 friends. 3 people that they
My
consider
trust
friends.
circle is pretty small.
And the average person has demand for meaningfully more. I think it's like 15 friends or something, right? I guess there's probably some point where you're like, all right, I'm just too busy. I can't deal with more people.
What about Facebook friends?
Yeah. Well, apparently Facebook friends are not enough for old Zuck. In an interview with podcaster Dwarkesh Patel this week, Zuckerberg asserted that more people should be connecting with chatbots on a social level because, in a striking line of argumentation, they don't have enough real friends. When asked if AI chatbots could help fight the loneliness epidemic, the billionaire painted a dystopian vision of the future in which we spend more time talking to AIs than flesh and blood humans. There's the stat that I always think is crazy. The average American, I think, has fewer than 3 friends. You just heard that.
What are you doing, Dave?
Exactly right. We need to get a collection of those sound bites for the program. What are you doing, Dave? I have to kill you, Dave. Movie, 2001: A Space Odyssey, where the artificial intelligence computer does take over the entire ship and kill the entire crew. But Zuckerberg is advocating for a future in which people are entirely disconnected, if they're not disconnected right now. And think about this. And Ken, you mentioned the whole Facebook friends. Now, the reality is, none of those people on your Facebook page, well, I shouldn't say none of them, but most of the people on your Facebook page are not your friends at all.
Yeah, this whole AI thing, and a lot of it is generational because some of these folks, we've got some young folks down there in Cheyenne in the legislature. And one of them said to me the other day, he says, I can't wait until we can have AI write laws, until AI gets good enough to write laws. And the fundamental horror of that, there was a Star Trek episode, you're kind of as Trekkie, but you remember they landed on the planet and everybody was just brains hooked up to a machine.
Yep, exactly right. I can't remember. There was a couple of those. Can't remember what the name of the episode was, but the point well taken that we have become so disconnected from each other. And I don't think that we can blame it solely on the pandemic, though, that the pandemic really did have something to do with it, that people were isolated. We were prevented by, in some cases by law from talking to each other. But social media really created an avalanche of disconnection between people. And instead, you focused your life online. And even me, I'm sometimes shocked when my phone gives me the little report that says you spent 10 hours on your phone the last week. Think about that. 10 hours on a piece of technology. And now Zuckerberg is saying that you need more friends that are AI driven, that you don't really need to talk to real people because, real people would dissuade you from whatever the computer is telling you. I mean, this is just a terrifying prospect. Let me continue with the piece. However, he also admitted, quote, that there was a stigma surrounding the practice of having AI friends right now, and that the technology was still very early. Now, he has a point. The current state of AI chatbots leaves a lot to be desired. Zuckerberg's interview with Patel was published just days after the Wall Street Journal reported that Meta staffers had raised concerns over underage users being exposed to sexually explicit discussions by the company's AI chatbots. And it was only a couple of days ago on this program, maybe a couple of weeks anyway, that I brought you the story of all of these chatbots engaging in sexually explicit behavior with minors. But just think about the implications of this, right? That if we live in a world where most of your friends are not real, that there is no human being behind them, that they're an entirely AI. I mean, what does that say for the human condition?
Have you ever played one of those new VR games?
No.
Okay, I did not want to do this. My son-in-law got one and was just, oh, this is so cool. You got to try this.
Okay.
I can't even tell you. It's intriguing. You're in there. But you have to kind of reorient yourself to another reality. And in so doing, you lose track of what really is real. And you ever think about the word amuse?
Yeah.
You know what amuse is?
Sure.
And when you put a in front of a word, what does that do to it?
Entertainment.
Amuse is to not muse, to not think.
Mm-hmm.
The antithesis. And what we're doing, it appears to me, sound like a conspiracy theorist, but that's okay. What we're doing is a complete distraction. Nobody's paying attention to reality. We're all tied up there. And then what happens in the background?
Well, I had a very similar experience in Cheyenne that you did. Not we need to have AI write laws, but it was almost equally disturbing to me that new legislators are using AI to explain bills. Now, our pal Tom Kelly had an interesting post the other day, and he asked the AI, and I don't remember which one it was, Grok or whatever, why he voted against House Bill 64. And the AI spit out something that Tom Kelly had never said. So what I'm getting at here is that it is still a computer and it is garbage in, garbage out, input, output. So whatever is input into the machine, that's all it has to deal with on the output. And literally what the AI is doing is searching the internet to try to answer your question in the best way that it can. And when I was having this conversation with a couple of new legislators, it was, I really love this AI. It can completely explain a bill to me.
Yeah.
No. It's not AI explaining a bill to you. It is whomever created the AI and whomever wrote the articles that the artificial computer program is relying on to spit out that data.
The sum total of that is a fabricated reality, which is exactly what Michelle and Barack were after.
Absolutely. That is exactly why I brought out that article today, that it is a fabricated ahistorical reality that really has no basis in, and I guess if it's not reality, it doesn't have any basis in the real world. But my point is that it is not human controlled. And anytime you rely on something that is artificial, you're not going to recognize the agenda that's behind all of this stuff. And my friends, I see an agenda everywhere I look. And specifically with AI, it doesn't matter what it is. Like I asked AI the other day to analyze the Cowboy State Politics podcast. And pretty much it's dumb, it's stupid, there's not enough depth, there's no explanation, no sources, and it was complete garbage. None of it was actually true. Well, what it was relying on is what people have said about the program, not what is actually in the program. So if you're a legislator and you're relying on an artificial computer program to tell you what a bill means, really what you're getting is what somebody else thinks it means, not what you think it means or what a computer program is analyzing it for. Definitely a terrifying situation. And if you add on top of that the comment that you received, Agent 29, that I can't wait for AI to write laws. What are you doing, Dave? I mean, just absolutely terrifying. And let me give you, and I know we're going a little bit long here, but I've been wanting to get to this story, so we may as well do it right now. So India and Pakistan, and I know you're going to think this next part is completely disconnected from the discussion that we had, but there is a terrifying situation going on between India and Pakistan. And the truth is, these two have been at each other's throats for, I don't know, hundreds of years, if not more. And the real scary part is both of them have nuclear weapons. And I remember when I was in high school, it was not all the time, but invariably you would have India set off a nuke, Pakistan would set off a nuke. And it was an escalatory conflict between these two. Now, they've been relatively quiet for a while, but now Pakistan is accusing India of an act of war. From ABC News. Dozens dead in Pakistan in overnight India attacks. Let's see here. Foreign Affairs said that it had summoned India's top diplomat in Pakistan over what it called a blatant act of aggression. The attacks, labeled Operation Sindoor, targeted 9 sites of terrorist infrastructure in Pakistan, and Pakistan occupied Jammu and Kashmir. No Pakistani military facilities were targeted, the Indian Defense Ministry said, calling their actions focused, measured, and non-escalatory. The Pakistani army said India struck 6 locations, including some places that I can't pronounce. At least 8 people were killed, including a 3-year-old, and another 35 injured, according to the Pakistani army, which claims civilian buildings were targeted. So why do I bring this up now? Well, if we have AI that is creating laws, and presumably AI that is controlling drones, and AI that is in control of a lot of our infrastructure, is it that big of a stretch to say that an AI bot could mistakenly target somebody else if there is a perceived threat? Because again, it's garbage in, garbage out. It's input versus output. And all you're doing is setting a set of conditions by which a reaction is triggered. So if-then statements.
Yeah, the carbon-based units are infecting the planet.
It's exactly right. Another Star Trek reference. I love it. That one was from the Ultimate Computer, by the way. No, Ultimate Computer or anyway, Star Trek. Anyhow, but it's all logic, right? So if and depending on how the logic is written determines what the outcome is going to be. Again, it's an if-then statement. If A happens, B is the result. And so if you take a hot zone, a very easily, God, I'm losing my words this morning, easily escalated situation like India and Pakistan, how hard is it to imagine that a nuclear weapon is launched, and then the logical response to that is another nuclear weapon. I mean, that's not outside of the realm of possibility.
Yeah, just think of the ultimate end of this. If everything goes to silicon-based life forms, all that's going to be on Earth is computers and the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders.
Indeed. But my point is that if we are reliant on AI for all this stuff, I mean, it's you're moving to a place where there's no emotion. The difference between one of the biggest differences is that there isn't any emotion in an AI. There's no empathy, there's no caring, there's no trust, there's none of those things that make human beings what they are. They are entirely artificial. And in any negotiation, I don't care what it is, with your family, with your spouse, between governments, when you remove the human characteristic out of it, it is pure, unadulterated, cold logic. And it is logic that is not independent. It is logic that is written and created by another individual. And so, it's no different than using an AI chatbot to interpret the law that you're trying to research, or if you're one of these new young whippersnappers and you think that AI needs to be able to write laws. Well, it's not being written independently. It is being controlled by somebody else, the person that wrote the program, and it is absolutely devoid of emotion. Well, that's kind of a downer to end the show on, but we have burned up more than another busy broadcast hour on the program. Make sure that you don't miss a single episode of Cowboy State Politics. I just published another podcast yesterday. Hold on just a second, Ken. I got to talk about a couple of other things. So the podcast is published every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, and you can listen to it anywhere that you get your podcasts. Apple, iTunes, Amazon, iHeartRadio, pretty much anywhere. Also, if you haven't checked out the new project I've been working on, you need to go check that out. It's called Politics Reloaded, and you can find it at the address politicsreloaded.substack.com. It's a deep dive, long form program in which we talk about stories that you may or may not have heard about, but we do it in such a way that we try to delve in. And, one of my co-hosts, Josh Jennings, he compares it to a microscope. In some cases, a telescope, where you can zoom out to the big 30,000 foot view, or we can zoom all the way into local and state politics so you get a complete understanding of what's going on. My hosts, Mark and Dana Jennings, and their son, Josh Jennings, who's a writer for the Glenn Beck program. We sit down, hopefully every week, and talk for about 2 hours. So go check it out, politicsreloaded.substack.com. But for now, from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics studio, I'm David Iverson, and this is the one and only Cowboy State Politics. See you tomorrow for Open Line Friday.